Millionaire sent divorce papers to his pregnant wife. On Valentine's, the Mistress sent him a bill for everything she spent. Love is supposed to be kind, patient, and triumphant against all odds, especially on Valentine's Day. Yet on a day dedicated to romance and devotion, a pregnant wife named Clara Maxwell received the ultimate betrayal divorce papers from her millionaire husband, James. The shock reverberated through their circle of family and friends, leaving Clara heartbroken and alone. Little did anyone suspect that another woman, Angelina James's enigmatic mistress, was also planning her own cunning twist on this fateful day. This is a tale bursting with secrets, lies, and the high-stakes world of wealth. Brace yourself for heartbreak, revelations, and most surprisingly, retribution. Clara Winfield was born and raised in a modest neighborhood in Cincinnati. Growing up, she dreamed of finishing college, starting her own catering business, and eventually finding love in a supportive partner who shared her sense of adventure. She believed in love that endured obstacles, nurtured growth, and blossomed over time. Throughout high school and university, Clara always thought that love's real test was how it responded to life's many unexpected twists. James Maxwell, on the other hand, seemed to live in a different universe entirely. Raised in an opulent Chicago penthouse, James wanted for nothing. His father, Albert Maxwell, was a real estate mogul who taught him the ropes of the high-stakes property world at a young age. Surrounded by wealth, James developed a taste for expensive suits, exclusive cars, and the finest vacations. He took pride in doing things on a grand scale, whether it was throwing lavish parties or investing in lucrative commercial real estate deals. Their worlds first collided one breezy summer evening at a charity gala in Cincinnati. Clara had volunteered to help organize the event, hoping to raise money for a local children's hospital. Her job was to handle VIP registrations and greet arriving guests. Amid the swirl of stylish men and women, James Maxwell arrived, wearing a tailored tuxedo, his hair perfectly groomed, exuding an air of quiet confidence. He couldn't help but notice the vibrant woman at the registration table, her radiant smile lighting up the entrance. Clara, in turn, was struck by the easy charm of this well-dressed stranger. Although their backgrounds were a world apart, the two found themselves drawn together by a shared sense of compassion for the charitable cause and an undeniable attraction. By the end of the evening, James had asked Clara to join him for a late-night coffee. Surprised by her own willingness to step out of her comfort zone, Clara said yes. They spent hours talking at a quiet bistro, discovering unexpected commonalities in their childhood dreams, their love for travel, and their desire to make a meaningful impact on the world. Despite the clear differences in their social status, Clara and James formed a bond so genuine that they were both taken by surprise. James introduced her to a world of high-rise fundraisers and exclusive yacht parties, while Clara, in turn, exposed him to the warm joy of home-cooked meals and simple weekend getaways without paparazzi or business deals overshadowing every moment. For a while, it felt like each completed something missing in the other's life. Yet as soon as they started to grow close, the cracks also began to emerge. James's family. Particularly Albert Maxwell was less than welcoming to this newcomer. The Maxwells had a tight-knit circle of acquaintances, often old money families that had known each other for generations. Clara was an outsider who didn't come from money, didn't understand the complexities of high society etiquette, and didn't measure up in Albert's critical eyes. That initial friction seemed minor to Clara, who believed that genuine love could supersede any social differences. She had faith that as long as James remained devoted to her, they could weather any storm, and for a while they did, until James's ambitions reached a tipping point. His real estate firm, Maxwell Properties, was skyrocketing in value. Flush with success, James became increasingly obsessed with closing deals, turning bigger profits, and looking for new expansion opportunities. Clara tried her best to support him, volunteering to host investor dinners at their home and making her presence known at every social event. However, she also noticed that more and more of James's time and energy shifted away from their relationship. They still shared tender moments, but these were often overshadowed by frantic, late-night business calls and weekend trips that James framed as crucial networking opportunities. When James proposed it was during a romantic weekend trip to Paris, he took Clara to a private rooftop dinner with a breathtaking view of the Eiffel Tower. The moment seemed pure magic, the twinkling lights of the city, the champagne, and the sincerity in James's voice when he confessed, "I can't picture my life without you," moved to tears. Clara accepted. That evening they promised each other that no matter how challenging their path, they would always come back to this love. But marriage, as everyone warned them, changed things. At first it was subtle. Clara felt she was dancing to keep up with James's hectic schedule and social obligations. The simpler joys in life, like a quiet Sunday brunch, became rarer as they juggled corporate events, power lunches, and endless travel. James, determined to make his father proud, spent more hours at the office, convinced that this was the right way to secure a future for himself and Clara. When Clara discovered she was pregnant a year into their marriage, she couldn't contain her excitement. She envisioned their child bonding them even closer, reminding James of the family they had promised each other. But James's reaction was more complicated. While he was happy at the news, clapping his hands in delight and taking Clara into a celebratory kiss, he also seemed worried about the implications on his busy life. "This is a big step," he said, stepping back from the embrace. "We'll have to adjust, but I'm sure we can handle it." Clara brushed off her concerns, believing that James's concerns about balancing a baby and his career were normal first-time father jitters, yet the subtle chasm between them widened. Clara often found herself alone in their spacious penthouse, reading pregnancy books and listening to the baby's heartbeat through a fetal Doppler. She attended prenatal checkups by herself, enduring the silent stares of the wealthy pregnant women in the waiting room, who seemed always accompanied by their husbands. She longed for James to hold her hand, to share in her wonder at the life they had created. He would apologize, frequently promising to attend the next appointment, only to be called away by urgent business matters. Clara tried to be understanding. She repeated a mantra to herself. "He's doing this for us, for the family." She told herself that once the baby arrived, James would naturally settle into fatherhood. Whenever James was home, she tried to make the penthouse feel cozy, a place of respite from his high-stakes career. In these fleeting moments, he seemed grateful, taking time to rub her belly and talk to the baby softly. But the next morning, he'd be gone before sunrise, diving back into the relentless business world. If Clara ever admitted there was a real problem, it was the day she first spotted a suspicious text message on James's phone. He had placed it on the kitchen counter, and it lit up with a preview from a sender named Angelina. The message simply read, "Did you tell her yet? I'm tired of waiting." The words burrowed into Clara's mind, lodging themselves there. While she tried to brush it off as a misunderstanding, the uneasy feeling gnawed at her. When she mustered the courage to ask James who Angelina was, he shrugged dismissively. "She's an investor. I can't keep track of all these people." Something about his tone was forced, and the conversation ended awkwardly. That night, Clara noticed he'd put a password on his phone for the first time. Still, Clara tried to quell her doubts. She was heavily pregnant, tired and scared of losing the life she had worked so hard to build. She repeated to herself, "He said he loves me. We have our baby on the way. This is just stress." She believed the best way to handle any cracks was to talk openly, but every time she tried to get James to open up, he either deflected or claimed he was too tired to engage in endless speculation. Soon enough, Valentine's Day loomed, and Clara held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, James would take the opportunity to show he still cared. She meticulously planned a romantic dinner at home, searching for heart-shaped decorations, sprinkling rose petals, and even ordering a custom-designed cake that read, "Daddy, I love you." She wanted him to feel the warmth of her love and the excitement of the new life they were bringing into the world. She imagined lighting candles, turning on soft music, and whispering sweet promises of a better future. But fate had different plans in store. Valentine's Day arrived with a cold snap in Chicago, the streets lined with frosty sidewalks and couples huddled close for warmth. Clara awoke early, determined to craft the perfect dinner ambiance. She carefully placed long-stemmed roses on the table, set out heart-shaped napkin holders, and heated up the chocolate fondue pot. She had her phone close by, expecting a sweet text or call from James. Instead, silence greeted her. By noon, she began to worry. James had left the penthouse the previous evening, claiming to have an urgent business flight to Los Angeles, but he promised to be back for Valentine's. No messages, no calls. The hours ticked by, and Clara's heart sank deeper into an anxious pit. She tried to distract herself with little tasks, rechecking the marinade for the roast, adjusting the table centerpiece. She even took a quick nap in the afternoon, her body strained by the late stage of pregnancy. Each time she woke, she peered at her phone, hopeful for any sign of life from James. When the door finally opened around 6 p.m., Clara felt a rush of relief. She hurried to the foyer, her wide smile at the ready. But she was greeted by the sight of James, haggard in appearance, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, coat dusted with snow. In his hands, surprisingly, was a manila envelope rather than a bouquet of roses. Clara's stomach churned with dread. Clara James said in a low voice. "We need to talk somewhere," in the back of her mind. Clara was still clinging to the idea that perhaps these were some documents for a property deal that needed her signature, a romantic gesture to involve her in his business. But the tone in James's voice suggested something far darker. He looked past her carefully arranged table, the swirling aroma of fresh rosemary and thyme, and held out the envelope. "Just read this," he whispered. Then, as if the act weighed him down, James sank onto the foyer bench, staring at the ground. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. The letterhead was from a top-tier Chicago law firm, Brownsdale and Thompson, divorce petition. It said in bold letters at the top inside, the words blurred together under Clara's tear-filled eyes, grounds for irreconcilable differences, requests for asset division, clauses about custody. The ultimate gut punch was discovering that James had filed well before Valentine's Day. These were the final papers waiting for Clara's signature. In that moment, Clara felt her world collapsing. How could James serve her divorce papers on Valentine's Day? Of all days, she was pregnant with his child, completely unprepared for such a betrayal. The anguish erupted in a wail she could not contain. She clutched her belly, tears streaming, struggling to remain upright on wobbly legs. The baby stirred within her, as though sensing her distress. James got up, trying to place a hand on her shoulder. She jerked away. "Don't touch me," she spat. Her voice cracked. "How could you do this? Especially today. You know how important Valentine's is to me, to us. And the baby. We're weeks away from the due date. James swallowed, avoiding her eyes. Clara, I'm sorry. I just can't go on pretending. This marriage isn't working. It hasn't been working for a while. Her thoughts spun in a dizzying loop. Yes, they'd been distant. Yes, she'd been lonely. But she had always clung to the possibility that he was just caught up in work. She had never imagined he would end their marriage so suddenly, so callously. What about the baby? She demanded. Voice shaking. I thought this was what you wanted. I do want to be there for my child, James stammered. But maybe not as a husband anymore. I can still provide financial support. Make sure both of you have everything you need. But, Clara, we're just not in love like we used to be. Each word stabbed her like a blade. She stared at him, searching for any hint of the tender man she thought she knew. But the face before her was closed off and resolute. The ring on his finger, the same ring she had placed there with trembling hands at their wedding, now felt like a cruel token, mocking her faith in love. When at last he left the penthouse that evening, muttering about needing space, Clara collapsed onto the floor. Sobbing beside her, the meticulously arranged table felt like a monument to a love that had just died. The custom cake remained untouched. The phrase, "Daddy, I love you," taunting her, alone and heartbroken. She wrapped her arms around her belly, whispering, "I will love you enough for both of us," to her unborn child. The news spread swiftly through the Maxwell family. Albert Maxwell, never one to mince words, declared that it was the right decision, insinuating that Clara had always been beneath them, and that the relationship had been doomed from the start. Friends were torn, some supported Clara and her heartbreak, while others, especially those reliant on James's business ties, aligned themselves with his perspective. Clara felt she'd been cast adrift. In the bleak days that followed, she battled surges of anger, despair, and confusion. Her obstetrician, Dr. Natasha Cole, warned her to manage her stress levels for the baby's sake. Clara tried to comply, but her nights were restless with nightmares, and her days overshadowed by the looming possibility of raising a child as a single mother. Then, quite unexpectedly, the second blow arrived in the form of a phone call from none other than Angelina. It came on a cold Tuesday morning, when Clara, still in her nightgown, was sipping chamomile tea to calm her nerves. The phone flashed with an unknown number. Under normal circumstances, she might not have answered, but her mind raced with the possibility it could be James calling from a different phone. She picked up. "Hello," she said, her voice weary. "Hello, Clara," a female voice asked, clipped and businesslike. "Yes." "This is Angelina," she said, letting the name linger, as though it were both a curse and a final flourish. "I thought it was time we talked." Clara's throat constricted, so the mysterious name was real. She forced herself to remain calm. "What do you want? I believe you know. By now that James and I are together," Angelina said smoothly. "We've been seeing each other for a while. And this?" There was the barest pause. This divorce was inevitable. Clara found herself speechless. Emotions flooded her. She wanted to hang up, to scream, to sob. Yet some bizarre curiosity compelled her to stay on the line. How did you even get my number?" A slight laugh. "James gave it to me. Look, I'm not here to make your life worse. I just think you should know how things stand. James and I, we're not your problem anymore, you understand. But you might want to prepare yourself, especially financially." Clara felt her nails dig into her palm, anger rising like bile. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You see," Angelina said, her voice ice cold. "James has made a lot of promises. He's spent a lot of money on me, on us, and I have a record of everything from the plane tickets to Bora Bora to the lavish gifts he insisted on. Now that I hear he's filed for divorce, I expect that he will take care of these debts. I've sent him an invoice, so to speak a bill for everything I spent, because I trusted he'd reimburse me." Clara's mind struggled to process the audacity. You're blackmailing him for money. Let's call it business." "Clara, and if you think I won't do the same to you, well, you don't know me very well. I just wanted to warn you. James might come crawling back, or he might lash out. Honestly, it's all quite messy. But I have no desire to drag this on if I get what I'm owed. We women, we need to look out for ourselves, right?" A wave of revulsion swept through Clara. She'd expected heartbreak, but this cold, calculated approach from the mistress was another level. She might have even found some twisted empathy for the other woman if Angelina had sounded at all remorseful. But clearly remorse wasn't part of Angelina's vocabulary. Clara pictured this woman, elegant, cunning, an apex predator in the world of high finance, seated somewhere with a glass of champagne, calmly tearing her life apart. "Don't ever call me again." Clara managed her voice, shaking, as she ended the call. She dropped the phone and stared at the empty living room, feeling the weight of her unborn baby shift inside her. This was a new reality. Not just that James was leaving her, but that the mistress he had chosen was the type who'd demand payment for her time and expenses on top of all the heartbreak. The next day, she found the strength to go through the legal paperwork in more detail. She discovered that James's terms were distinctly skewed in his favor. He wanted a clean break with minimal spousal support, a visitation schedule for when the baby arrived, and an expectation that Clara would not make any claims on Maxwell family assets, something inside. Clara snapped. She might have been willing to separate quietly, but this was a direct attack on her child's future. She decided she needed a lawyer, fast enter. Monica Farnsworth, a formidable attorney with a track record of winning high-stakes divorce battles for women married to wealthy men. Monica came recommended by Clara's friend Melanie Sykes, who had once tangled with a controlling ex-husband. When Clara arrived in Monica's downtown office, she was greeted by a woman with steely eyes and impeccable posture. On hearing the details, Monica assured Clara she had a strong case, especially given Clara's pregnancy and James's net worth. "First," Monica said, leaning across her polished desk, "we need to gather evidence, any texts, receipts, or correspondences that prove infidelity or that James is trying to defraud you and your child of what you deserve. Were you aware of Angelina before these divorce papers?" Through tears, Clara recounted the suspicious texts and the phone call. She felt both humiliated and empowered by sharing the story. Monica's expression remained steadfast, absorbing every detail like a sponge. "We'll subpoena phone records if necessary. Meanwhile, we'll file for temporary spousal support and use the pregnancy to our advantage in negotiations. Your baby deserves financial security." Clara left the office that day with a flicker of hope. She was still reeling from the emotional torment, but at least she now had a fighter in her corner. She realized that if James and Angelina were determined to disrupt her life, she would find the strength to shield herself and her child from their fallout. But as she soon discovered, legal battles were only one layer of the unfolding drama. Her heart was far from done being tested. In the weeks that followed the Valentine's Day bombshell, Clara found herself entrenched in a labyrinth of legal and emotional turmoil. Despite the heartbreak, she had to maintain her composure for the baby's sake. Dr. Cole repeatedly warned her about her escalating blood pressure, cautioning that stress could lead to premature labor or other complications. More than ever, Clara needed to stay grounded. Meanwhile, James moved out of the penthouse and into a high-rise apartment he'd kept as a corporate suite. Even in their estrangement, he occasionally texted to check on Clara's health. Every message ended with a cold note of formality. "We can discuss child support soon. Gone were the days of tender, 'I miss you' or sweet dreams." If it hurt him to treat her this way, he never let it show. The Maxwell family, spearheaded by Albert, exerted its influence behind the scenes. Clara heard rumors that Albert had been the driving force, pushing James toward a quick divorce, citing irreconcilable lifestyles and the need to preserve the Maxwell brand. Through acquaintances and social media whispers, Clara learned that James had introduced Angelina to certain high society circles. She felt an acidic churn in her stomach, envisioning the same events she'd once attended with James, now featuring Angelina as his glamorous companion. But then came the dramatic twist that caught everyone off guard. Angelina made a public move. She apparently believed James was dragging his feet in settling her expenses, so she took matters into her own hands. On a quiet Monday morning, a gossip website, Chicago Daily Buzz, posted a salacious article titled, "Millionaire's Mistress Demands Payment for Everything She Spent, and She Has Receipts." The story cited anonymous sources, but the subtext was glaringly directed at James Maxwell. It included leaked photos of Angelina with James at various exclusive resorts and hinted at credit card records that proved James had been funding her lavish lifestyle even before his divorce filing. In the court of public opinion, the scandal caused a sensation. Some commentators mocked Angelina's brassiness, condemning her for being a gold digger. Others argued that James had made promises he should fulfill. For the Maxwells, it was a PR nightmare. An internal family dispute splashed all over the tabloids, fueling speculation about James's moral character and business ethics. Investors who had once clamored for deals with Maxwell properties began to question James's personal judgment, and the Maxwell brand suffered. Amid the chaos, Clara discovered an odd sense of vindication. For the first time, Angelina's presence was hurting James's reputation rather than overshadowing Clara's heartbreak. Still, she took no pleasure in the public drama. She wanted a clean break and a secure future for her child, but the scandal was unstoppable, fueled by paparazzi eager for sensational headlines. Every day, Clara dreaded turning on the TV or checking her phone, afraid of what new twist the tabloids might spin. She was seated on the couch one evening, wearing her most comfortable pajamas, sipping herbal tea, when she got an unexpected visit from James's mother, Linda Maxwell. Linda was the more reserved half of the Maxwell parents, often overshadowed by Albert's commanding presence. They had never been close, but Linda had always been polite to Clara. At the door, Linda stood with a hesitant smile. "Clara," she said softly, "may I come in? Unsure what to expect." Clara led her inside, the tension palpable. She offered Linda a seat on the sofa, but Linda waved her off politely, preferring to stand as though she didn't plan to stay long. "I wanted to see how you're doing, Linda," said, her eyes scanning the penthouse's half-packed boxes. Clara had started removing personal items in anticipation of leaving. "I'm worried about you." Dear Clara forced a polite smile. "That's kind of you. I'm doing my best. The baby's due in a few weeks." "So," she hesitated, tears threatening to surface. "It's a lot." Linda nodded, glancing at Clara's growing belly. She sighed. "Look, I know we haven't always been close. Albert can be a handful, and James. Well, he can be stubborn, but I never wanted this for you, for any of us. Clara studied Linda's expression. It lacked the scorn she had seen in Albert. Instead, Linda seemed genuinely regretful. I appreciate that, Clara said quietly. But James served me divorce papers on Valentine's Day. It's hard to imagine he ever loved me, if he could be so cruel. Linda's voice trembled slightly. James is in over his head. I don't agree with how he's handled things, but Albert has been relentless in pushing for a divorce ever since you got married. He claims you two were never compatible, that your backgrounds are too different. James has always sought his father's approval, sometimes at any cost. Linda paused as though searching for the right words. But that doesn't excuse his betrayal. I just want you to know there's at least one person in the Maxwell family who cares about your well-being, and especially about my future grandchild's well-being. A wave of emotion crashed over Clara. She fought back tears, overwhelmed by the conflict of feeling both anger toward the Maxwells and gratitude for Linda's sympathy. I'm not sure what to say. She admitted, I'm scared about the future. He wants to limit spousal support, and I don't know how safe we'll be financially. I mean, I can work, but it'll be difficult with a newborn. Linda gave a slow nod. Yes, that's what Albert's lawyers are advising James. They think they can give you a lump sum settlement and be done with it. But I want you to fight, Clara. You deserve more, and that child deserves the best possible life, one that James can afford. It was a startling thing to hear from a Maxwell. Clara looked at Linda more closely, noticing the lines of worry etched around her eyes and mouth. Why are you telling me this? A sad smile flickered across Linda's lips. Because I don't like what's happening. Because I've watched you try to integrate into this family with grace, and I believe you deserve better. And maybe there's part of me that hopes James will realize what he's lost before it's too late. Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. She rose from her seat and gently took Linda's hand. Thank you, she whispered, tears threatening to spill. I needed to hear that. Before Linda left, she placed a small envelope on the table. This is my personal number, and also the name of a therapist I trust. If you ever need someone to talk to, or if you need anything for the baby, please don't hesitate. When the door closed, Clara stood there, heart pounding. She felt an odd sense of relief and heartbreak mingling together. Linda's words echoed in her mind. Fight for what you deserve. And that is precisely what Clara resolved to do. She would no longer be the compliant wife who tiptoed around James's schedule, or the timid girl bowing to the Maxwell patriarch's disdain. She was about to become a mother, and mothers, she realized, can be fiercely protective when forced. A few days later, Clara had a meeting with Monica Farnsworth to plan their next move. Monica's confidence was unshakable as she told Clara that the tabloid frenzy around Angelina's bill could actually work in Clara's favor. The bigger the scandal, the more James will want to settle. This mistress is a liability, not only personally, but professionally. His father's empire depends on a clean reputation. Clara felt emboldened by the momentum she provided Monica with every detail. She had text messages that James had accidentally left on an old phone, receipts for gifts he'd given Angelina, and even snippets of the voice message Angelina left, essentially admitting to extorting James for money. Monica's eyes lit up when she heard the recordings. Gold, she declared. We can use this in negotiations to paint James as someone who put his wife in emotional turmoil while spending a fortune on another woman. However, just when Clara thought she had the upper hand, A new storm brewed Angelina's final tactic to get James's attention, and his money was a direct attack on Clara 1, late afternoon. As Clara returned from a checkup, she found a small unmarked package waiting at her door. Inside was a single letter, addressed to Mrs. Maxwell. It read, "Dear Clara, since James insists on ignoring my repeated invoice, and you're still technically his wife, I am holding you both responsible. I'm well aware you're pregnant, so I will try not to be too harsh. But if I don't receive payment for the following sums attached in detail for all the expenses I incurred with James, I will go public with more intimate photos and messages that could humiliate you, him, and the Maxwell family, far beyond the gossip rags you've already seen. You may think you have the upper hand, but you really don't. James owes me. I won't be made a fool of. Regards." Angelina Clara's stomach lurched as she read the letter. The attached list was extensive. Tens of thousands of dollars spent on luxury hotels, designer clothes, private flights, fancy dinners. Angelina was basically blackmailing both James and Clara, threatening to escalate the scandal to humiliating new heights. That night, Clara tried to reach James, calling him repeatedly. He finally picked up after the 6th attempt. She read him the letter, word for word, her voice trembling. "What are we supposed to do, James? I can't handle this." She's unhinged. For a moment, there was silence. Then James spoke. "I'm so sorry you have to go through this. I never wanted you involved in my mess. But I won't let her threaten you. Send it all to your lawyer and let her handle it. I'll make sure we shut her down. We are you part of this we. Now," Clara snapped, anger flaring. "You left me. You gave her power in the first place by messing around with her. Don't you realize the damage you've done?" James sighed heavily. "I know, I can't change that. But I also can't let her drag you through the mud, regardless of our divorce. You're carrying my child. I'll deal with Angelina." Before she could say anything else, he ended the call. Clara lowered her phone, uncertain whether she felt relief or dread. James's sudden protective streak was overshadowed by the knowledge that at the end of the day, he was still the man who had abandoned her. Outside, the Chicago skyline glowed, and Clara's reflection in the window looked strangely determined. One thing was certain. Angelina's games had awakened a fierceness in Clara she never knew she possessed. She would protect herself, and she would protect her child no matter the cost. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal maneuvering. Monica Farnsworth took the new documents from Angelina, along with the blackmail letter, to file for an emergency injunction against Angelina's threats. We can argue emotional distress, targeted harassment, and blackmail, Monica explained to Clara, scanning through legal precedents. Plus, she's targeting a pregnant woman that will not play well in court. James's lawyers ironically found themselves working in tandem with Clara's on this one-issue muzzle, Angelina, before she did irreversible damage. As much as James wished to separate from Clara, he did not want to see his entire empire crumble under the weight of a relentless mistress's blackmail. Attempts Angelina, however, was no pushover. She hired her own top-tier attorney, a suave negotiator named Declan Pierce, known for his ability to turn even the dirtiest laundry into a bargaining chip. Declan argued that Angelina was simply seeking what was fairly promised to her. He made brazen statements that James and Clara had enjoyed a lavish lifestyle on Maxwell money, and Angelina was equally entitled to such support given James's promises. Every day, the local news fixated on the spectacle of the Maxwell affair. Paparazzi hounded Clara whenever she ventured out, snapping photos of her rounded belly as if it were the centerpiece of a twisted soap opera. She tried not to read the headlines, but they seeped into her life regardless. Scorned mistress battles, pregnant wife, millionaire's divorce, explodes with blackmail allegations, and so on. All this came to a head in a preliminary court hearing for Clara and James's divorce settlement, combined with a hearing on Clara's petition against Angelina's harassment. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. On one side sat Clara, supported by Monica Farnsworth. James, suited up in grey and looking drawn, was accompanied by his counsel. Angelina and Declan appeared cool and composed, as if expecting a quick payday. Clara's heart pounded as the judge, the Honourable Barbara Whitefield, flipped through pages of legal briefs. She peered over her glasses at both parties. "I've reviewed the documents. Ms. Maxwell is pregnant. The defendant, Ms. Angelina, has threatened blackmail. And Mr. Maxwell is in the midst of finalizing a divorce. Let me be very clear. This is an extremely delicate situation. If Ms. Angelina's alleged threats are substantiated, there will be serious consequences." Angelina's attorney tried to deflect, claiming that Angelina was merely seeking reimbursement for costs James had promised to cover. James's attorney shot back that no legal contract existed to prove such an obligation. Monica presented excerpts from text messages and voicemails that implied Angelina used threatening language to coerce payment. Finally, the judge, clearly wanting to avoid a full-blown scandal, ordered both sides into a mediation to resolve the blackmail issue. The judge also gave stern instructions that no further harassment or release of personal materials would be tolerated under threat of contempt charges. During a short recess, Clara found herself alone in the hallway. She leaned against a marble pillar, catching her breath. The baby kicked insistently, as if unsettled by all the tension. She let out a shaky exhale, rubbing her belly. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. Suddenly, James approached with cautious steps. He looked at her belly, then lifted his gaze to her face. "Are you all right?" She nodded stiffly. "I'll manage." A pause hung between them. At last, James sighed, his voice subdued. "I never thought we'd end up here. Clara," she let out a hollow laugh. "Well, we are here, and it's largely thanks to your choices." He stiffened, then glanced away. When he spoke again, his voice trembled with a flicker of remorse. "I know. There's no excuse for what I did, my affair serving divorce papers on Valentine's Day. I was lost, caught up in my father's ambitions, and I made a horrible mistake. I truly don't want you to suffer, Clara." Searched his face, looking for any traces of the man she once adored. "You can't just say you're sorry and undo all the hurt," she said, softly swallowing her tears. "I'm about to raise our child alone." A silent moment passed. James's eyes flickered with an unreadable emotion. Then the bailiff announced the recess was over, and they were escorted back into the courtroom. Whatever had been left unsaid between them would have to wait. The mediation session stretched over the next week. Mediators tried to hash out a settlement where James would pay Angelina a certain sum, less than what she demanded, but enough to keep her from releasing further incriminating materials. Clara had no direct interest in whether Angelina got a payout, but she recognized that containing Angelina's vendetta would shield her unborn child from an ongoing circus. Parallel to this, negotiations for Clara's divorce settlement ramped up. Monica leveraged James's desire for a quick resolution and the Maxwell family's fear of scandal to secure a hefty settlement. Spousal support, child support, and a sizable trust fund for the baby's education and future expenses were all on the table. At first, James's attorneys balked, but after seeing Albert Maxwell's steely face at the prospect of more negative press, they eventually relented to most of Monica's demands. The day negotiations concluded was a bittersweet triumph for Clara. She sat across from James in a private conference room, their respective lawyers scribbling signatures on thick stacks of legal documents. At the final moment, James picked up his pen, hesitated, then signed. He looked up at Clara, remorse brimming in his eyes. "I want you to know," he began softly. "I never stopped caring about you." "Then why did you?" She stopped herself, voice trembling. "Never mind. It doesn't matter now. Just be a good father. James, please." His gaze fell to the floor, and for a moment she wondered if there was a part of him that truly regretted it. All the betrayal, the heartbreak, the public humiliation. When the last signature was inked, the lawyers shook hands, and the meeting adjourned. Monica gave Clara a reassuring smile, whispering, "You did well. You're going to be okay." But Clara, her heart pounding and her eyes misty, was far from certain. She might have won the legal battle, but her emotional wounds ran deep. Weeks turned into a blur of final pregnancy preparations and media fallout. Clara, newly empowered by the settlement, moved into a spacious condo with easier access to her OB/GYN. She tried to make it a home, filling it with soft blankets, baby clothes, and a pristine crib, though the ache of James's absence weighed on her. They had dreamed of this moment together, yet here she was alone. The scandal over Angelina's bill eventually fizzled out as she and James reached a confidential settlement. Gossip columns moved on to the next big scandal, leaving behind a battered Maxwell reputation and a deeply fractured family, Albert. Maxwell continued to run the business side of things, but rumors suggested James's hold on Maxwell properties had weakened considerably. The fiasco had left shareholders shaken. Some had begun to question James's ability to lead after such a public meltdown. Ironically, it was this family tension that led to one final twist in Clara's story. One chilly spring evening, Clara's phone buzzed. She answered it, expecting Monica's routine check-in or perhaps a grocery delivery. Instead, Albert Maxwell's stern voice boomed on the other end. "Clara, it's Albert. Linda told me you're scheduled for a C-section next week." She clutched the phone, heart racing. Yes, that's correct." The baby's breech and Dr. Cole recommended a scheduled C-section. Albert cleared his throat, his voice thick with an emotion Clara couldn't quite identify. "I just wanted you to know. Linda and I would like to be there if you'll have us. You're still carrying our grandchild after all." For a moment, Clara was speechless. This was the man who had relentlessly pushed for a divorce, who had disparaged her background and her worth. The man who had looked down on her from day one, believing she wasn't good enough for his son. And now he was asking to be present for her baby's birth. She inhaled slowly, remembering Linda's kindness. Perhaps this child could be a bridge, she thought, a chance for a new start, at least for the baby's sake. So she agreed with reservations. "As long as you respect my boundaries, and I don't want unnecessary stress." Albert was uncharacteristically subdued. "Understood. Thank you, Clara." The week flashed by in a rush of final medical checkups and restless nights. When the big day came, Clara was admitted to the hospital early in the morning. She lay in a hospital bed, wool lines attached, trying to calm her nerves. She had pictured this moment so many times before James by her side, holding her hand, whispering reassurances. Instead, she was flanked by a nurse, while Monica occasionally checked in, and Linda hovered anxiously by the doorway. Albert waited in the corridor, pacing like a caged lion. Clara's chest tightened as the surgical team wheeled her into the operating room. The fluorescent lights felt jarring, and the temperature was cooler than expected. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing courage to replace the pang of loneliness. But just as she was about to drift off into sedation, a hand clasped hers gently. She opened her eyes to see James, standing there in surgical scrubs, looking at her with a mixture of concern and regret. "Do you mind if I'm here?" he asked quietly. "I cleared it with the hospital." Tears sprang to Clara's eyes. She wanted to shout at him to tell him he'd lost his right to witness this moment. But beneath the swirl of anger, she realized that this was also his child's birth. "Yes." She managed her voice, thick with emotion. "You can stay." The procedure began. Time felt stretched thin, punctuated by the beep of machines and the gentle murmuring of the medical team. Clara drifted in and out, conscious enough to hear Dr. Cole's soothing voice. "We're almost there, Clara." A sudden release of pressure, then the shrill, miraculous cry of a newborn. The nurse lifted a tiny, wailing bundle of life. Clara's heart soared. She had never felt such a rush of unconditional love. "It's a girl," Dr. Cole declared, smiling beneath her surgical mask. "A healthy baby girl." Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks. She reached out as the nurse brought the infant closer. James stood there, tears in his own eyes. "She's perfect," he whispered, voice trembling. In that tender moment, the bitterness and betrayal receded, if only for a heartbeat. They were two people welcoming a child into the world. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead, marveling at the tiny wisps of dark hair and the delicate little hands that curled around her finger. James gently brushed a finger across the baby's cheek, tears threatening to spill from his eyes. "Thank you." He mouthed, his gaze locked with Clara's. For the next few days, Clara stayed in the hospital to recover. Linda and Albert made brief visits each quietly, in awe of their granddaughter. Linda offered to help with diaper changes or hold the baby, while Clara rested. And even Albert managed a small, teary-eyed smile when he first saw the child still. Clara maintained her boundaries. Whatever fleeting warmth was shared in that room, it did not erase all that had happened. As for James, he returned daily, bringing small gifts for the baby and fresh flowers for Clara. He never tried to push for reconciliation or linger in her room longer than she allowed. Instead, he seemed content, just to hold his daughter, marveling at her tiny existence. Clara observed a softer side to him, reminiscent of the man she had fallen for in the early days. Yet she couldn't simply forget the heartbreak he had caused. Still, she saw glimmers of genuine remorse in his eyes every time he gazed at the newborn. On Clara's last day in the hospital, James asked if he could have a private word with her, with the baby sleeping serenely in a bassinet and Linda out grabbing coffee. Clara agreed. "I know," she said softly before he could speak. "I know you're sorry. I know you love her." She glanced at their baby. "But I can't just pretend none of this happened." James nodded solemnly. "I understand. I'm not asking you to forgive me all at once, or to give me another chance, right away. I just want to be a good father, and I want you to know I'll support you in any way I can, Clara." "Considered his words, I believe you," she said at last. "But we can't rush anything. We'll figure out how to co-parent. If over time you prove that you're truly willing to change, maybe we can talk about what that looks like." A flicker of hope danced in James's eyes. He placed a gentle hand on the baby's bassinet, looking at the little one with a tender smile. "That's more than I deserve," he murmured. When Clara left the hospital, her baby cradled in her arms, she felt a swirl of emotions: relief, exhaustion, a tiny spark of cautious optimism. She was no longer the same woman she'd been on Valentine's Day. She was stronger, more determined, and she had a precious life to protect. 1 month later, Clara settled into a new routine, caring for her daughter, whom she'd named Juliet Marie Maxwell, and forging a tentative co-parenting agreement with James. The divorce was finalized, but an unexpected civility developed between them. James visited frequently, often bringing groceries, baby supplies, or just his presence. He introduced Juliet to a calm and loving father, never once letting the shadows of his affair and betrayal fall upon the child. Angelina, for her part, sank back into relative obscurity. Her settlement with James came with a strict non-disclosure clause, and though rumors persisted that she'd moved on to greener pastures, no one paid much attention anymore. Clara sometimes wondered if Angelina ever experienced remorse or emptiness, but she quickly realized it no longer mattered. Angelina was part of a painful chapter she was determined to close. On a warm summer afternoon, Clara found herself sitting in the condo's sun-drenched living room, watching Juliet gurgle happily on a soft playmat. In that innocent smile, Clara saw hope. Yes, her life had taken a drastic turn. She had faced betrayal, heartbreak, public scandal, and near constant stress during pregnancy. But she had emerged not just unscathed, but empowered. She might never fully trust James again, or perhaps she might find a path to forgive him in time. Either way, she and her daughter had a future filled with possibility, a future that began the moment Clara chose to stand up for herself and for the tiny life she was bringing into the world. Thank you for joining me on this tumultuous journey, one that began with a Valentine's Day nightmare and ended with a newborn spark of hope. Clara's story is a testament to the resilience we carry inside, even when betrayal blindsides us and heartbreak seems impossible to overcome. She fought back, not just for her own dignity, but for the innocent life relying on her strength. Ultimately, she found a way to face the past without letting it define her future. Now, if you found yourself rooting for Clara and Juliet, cheering on every victory and feeling the sting of every setback, please hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support fuels more stories of courage, drama, and redemption, stories that remind us we're never truly alone in our battles. Stay tuned for more, and thank you for watching.